Continuing Chapter 4 of Part 6. His reply was, "The kingdom of God does not come with observation. Neither shall they say, Lo, here or there, for behold, the kingdom of God is already among you." So the spiritual path isn't just about experience. Experience can come, but don't make it about experience seeking. This question and reply shows how entirely unable, to the very last, the countrymen of Jesus were to comprehend his character and mission, and to divest themselves of sensuous ideas of the messianic appearance and rule. Jesus taught them that the kingdom was not a matter of external display and brilliancy. Nevertheless, as he said to his disciples immediately after, when it came, men should not inquire whether it had come and where, because it should be as apparent as the lightning, but it should be in the souls of men. Turning then to his disciples, he said, "Days will come when ye shall desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and yet shall not see it. And they shall say to you, See here, or see there. Do not go away, nor follow them. For as the lightning lightens out of one part under heaven, shines to the other under heaven, so shall the Son of Man be in his day. But first he must suffer many things, and be rejected by this generation. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man, because you say new or nooch, or, they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and removed all. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building, but the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day he who is upon the house, and his goods in the house, let him not come down to take them away, and he who is in the field, let him likewise not return to the things behind. Remember Lot's wife. Whosoever shall have sought to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall have lost his life shall restore it. I tell you, there shall be two in one bed, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two shall be grinding at the same mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two shall be in the field, one shall be taken, and the other left. These revelations of troubles seem to have shocked the disciples. They ask in surprise, "Where, Lord?" His answer is a proverb. "Wherever the body, there also will the eagles be gathered together." It is difficult to lay aside preconceptions and read sincerely any book which has been read over and over by us and to us from earliest childhood, with certain comments or presumptions. This passage of the teaching of Jesus has been an excruciation to commentators who in their turn have submitted it to all kinds of violent wrenchings and twistings. It is a curiosity in mental history how the destruction of Jerusalem can be supposed to have been taught to the hearers of Jesus. Any terrible catastrophe in human history can just as well be supposed to have been in the mind of Jesus. Let us put ourselves in their places, knowing nothing of Catholic and Protestant and the medieval scholastic and the modern critical comments and theories, and listen to Jesus. The disciples had heard the Pharisees when they taunted him with the question of the establishment of that kingdom, which he and John had been predicting. And one of the number one reasons why people have been leaving Christianity to the point where this country has gone from almost totally Christians, 99% or whatever, but to less than half. It's because people have read the Bibles and allowed themselves to have their own conclusions. Not that they don't accept that there was some prophet or something, but the idea of Jesus being God and all that other stuff. And I think if more of the Christians read and allowed themselves to form their own opinions rather than just repeating other people's opinions, that would happen. He told them that it was already among them, but they had not the sagacity to discern it. The same question would naturally appear to be in the minds of the disciples. Yes, when will it appear? He instructs them not to be carried away by outward appearances, attractive manifestations, and cries of false messiahs. None of these things belong to the real kingdom of God. And as we find in the Bible, there were a series of real messiahs. Some of them weren't even human. You see the word anointed. This, even inanimate objects were messiahed. But the mere outburst of human passion, when we recall that the Goetia, not the Goetia, shortly before the destruction of Jerusalem, by means of false promises and miracles, led many away into the wilderness to perish. We see reason for this warning. Josephus, Antiquities 28:6. Compare Josephus de Bell. Jude. Yeah, I don't remember what that stands for, but 2:13 and 14. Oh, Judea. Okay, but anyways, in Acts, not the Bible book. I was thinking of the Bible book. In Acts 5:36 and 37, he told them of his own suffering and rejection, and then predicted a revelation of himself at some time, a parousia of the Son of Man, whatever that might mean. But there is a mystic air to this whole speech. Oh, he's not going to tell us what that word means? I'm going to have to look it up after I do the show. In general, it seems to teach that the coming events do not cast their shadows before, that when any stupendous crisis in the world's affairs occurs, there is little, if any, outward previous manifestation. It is like a dry rot in a house, which reveals itself only when it has so eaten away the substantial supports that the whole edifice comes to its fall. The flood was such a crisis. The destruction of Sodom was such, up to the moment of the first plash of rain, up to the moment of the first hurtling of sparks in the hot atmosphere. In the one case and in the other, men and women went about their usual pleasures and businesses, as if nothing extraordinary were on the eve of occurring. So shall it be at the parousia of the Son of Man, whatever and whenever and wherever that may be. And men need not speculate on that. They can never know it. It has no harbingers. It is not in the field of such events which can be prognosticated. Men should simply be always at their posts, always doing their duty, and always right at heart. The revelation of the Son of Man is a crisis, in the sense of a judgment and discrimination. It shall separate death from life, the dead from the living. Life is preservative. The birds of prey do not attack the living, but the dead. Therefore keep alive. It seems that Jesus had in his mind the idea of some display of himself, which should be of universal interest. But who can tell all he meant? Because the troubles that were coming upon the world, he spake this parable to his disciples, to teach them not so much the duty as the necessity of prayer, that men should not be faint-hearted, he said. There was a certain judge in a certain city who feared not God, neither regarded man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, Avenge me of my adversity. And he would not for a time, but afterwards he said within himself, Though I fear not God, nor regard man yet, because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her. Then passed over reading that because, it was solid. Will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she torment me. Hear what the unjust judge says. And shall not God avenge his chosen, who cry day and night to him, even though he delay long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. And it's sort of on the same level. If you think that something's required, or it's just or it's needed for you, it's about the same thing, because it's duty to yourself or duty that you do for something other than you. But there's of course higher stations of what to do about prayers and stuff like that. To interpret a parable, it is necessary to know what is the pivot of instruction on which it revolves, and then it is not necessary to find a doctrine in all the lights and shades of the picture, in all the folds of the drapery, of the statue, of a parable. It is exercised sorely the ingenuity of some commentators, that the good God should be likened to an unjust judge. No such thing is done. The parable is intended to teach not the duty, not the beauty, not the profit, but the absolute necessity of prayer, and not the prayer which consists merely of expressions of formal petitions, but the prayer which is the real and constant desire of the soul. That only is true prayer. It may sometimes break forth into words of devotion and even agonies of spiritual wrestling, but men must always pray, and that constant spiritual pressure brings help. The illustration is from an unjust judge whose injustice the commentators desire to modify, thus destroying the whole force of the parable. The stronger the judge and the more unjust, the poorer, the weaker, the suppliant, the more impressive is the lesson of Jesus. For God is not compared to this judge, but set in contrast with him. The badness of the judge is shown in that he was impious and inhuman. Well, those are certainly human choices, but we're more than our incarnation, right? But you can be worse than just a body. You could, but anyways, he feared not God. He had no regard for man. Not that he even said this to himself, much less admitted it to other men, but the soliloquy represents his prevailing strain of feeling. His petitioner is represented in the utmost helplessness. We have all learned the destitution of Oriental widowhood. This suppliant was a woman, a widow, poor and persecuted. The judge had no disposition to help her, and no reason in the world to do so, except that by the continuance of her prayer she should be a torment to him. Really? See, people need to stop with that. If people pray, they torment me. No. Just, if you don't want to pray with them or whatever, just don't. In the exaggeration of selfishness, he uses a word which signifies to make one black and blue about the eye. She will overcome him by her importunity. He grants her request not because it is just, but because he pities her, but because of his selfishness to save himself from annoyance. The argument of Jesus is this: if constant prayer can prevail against the selfishness of an unjust human being, how certainly it will find answer in the heart of the good God. Some of my ancestors use the word Dagda and Father, and you didn't have to think of God in terms of Father. Immediately upon delivering this parable, Jesus added, "But when the Son of Man comes, he will find the faith upon earth." Oh, will he find the faith upon earth? It is an expression of despondency. It seems to intimate that when the parousia of which he was speaking shall take place, when the Son of Man shall reveal himself, he may find faith in his coming so rare that the world shall not be prepared for it. And we look at the Christian version of that, and you can look at Matthew 7:21-23 as an example. Wait, he didn't know that type of person, and he's going to cast them out. And so comparatively, and especially if not having faith in his way was given the label of believing in him, it's going to seem quite strange, right? But what people have to do for the messianic return and stuff like this. It's not just one figure comes and does it, so that's what people aren't going to be prepared for. The history of the race shows that humanity is never expectant the moment before the fall of some great influence upon its history. He spoke another parable, that of the Pharisee and the publican, which Luke reports in this immediate connection, and which the harmonists generally assign to this time in the career of Jesus. Whenever spoken, I see a reason why Luke should report the two parables together, as they are didactically connected, their teachings being of the same subject. This particular parable must be assigned to this general period of the life of Jesus, as it would naturally be suggested by the thousands of pilgrims now going up to the temple for worship, but it does seem that it would be more appropriate where there were Pharisees to hear it than to be told to his disciples alone, while on the other hand it is true that he had seen in his own family of disciples certain displays of dispositions of which this parable is corrective. Because I cannot satisfy myself of any better place for the instruction of the parable, I give it here. It was intended to teach humility in prayer, as the parable of the unjust judge was to teach persistence. The parable is this: 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a tax gatherer. The Pharisee, standing, prayed these words: God, I thank thee that I am not as the rest of men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even this tax gatherer, which is much better than the prayer, thank God I was born a Jew and not of some other nation, and thank God I was born a man and not a woman. And there are really prayers like that you can find. So at least that's better. And honestly, we're all born on the right path, but society or our parents or whatever convinces us otherwise, and then we hit puberty, and if we stay to being misled, then it's our fault, really. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I get, and the tax gatherer, standing afar off, would not even lift up eyes to heaven, but smote on his breast, saying, Be merciful to me, the sinful one. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified beyond that one. For everyone who exalteth himself shall be humbled, and he who humbleth himself shall be exalted. Luke says that this parable was leveled against those who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. It is a graphic lesson. The Pharisee went into the temple. He stood to pray. There was no evidence of pride. The Jews generally stood when they prayed, and the exceptions were when they became excitedly devout, so that to kneel would have been rather a display of ostentation. The tax gatherer also stood. In several Greek editions occur words which in the common English version are translated with himself, which some have connected with the standing as indicative of the separatists. He stood by himself. St. Bernard alludes to this apparently proud isolation in prayer, but the words do not occur in the oldest text and are doubtless an interpolation. There was no intention to ridicule the man, nor to exaggerate Pharisaism, but to contrast it with the simplicity of faith and teach what Jesus, from the beginning until this, the closing period of his ministry, constantly insisted upon: the superiority of simple faithfulness to one's convictions over all devotions to mere forms of worship, so that men might feel how much better it is to be the penitent than the Puritan. Well, you can combine the two, but one of the things is that some of the most important rituals have some variation. You can, particularly in silent portions of them. And remember, if you turn to what you call the Old Testament, which is not the right word for tonic, and it's reordered, and there's some intentional mistranslations by the Catholic Church and their version of the Septuagint, but, well, you don't say the J sound in Greek, but yeah, that word for prayer indicates more than just, oh, well, I'm going to do something spiritual, so I'm going to call it a prayer. This self-complacent worshiper addressed God in terms of thankfulness. which soon show themselves to be the thin veil covering his pride. So see, you can't just skip to the father stage and, I'm going to have skills and have some rules or commandments or whatever. It's like, yeah, you kind of have to have that relationship stuff down first, right? Or with it. He separated himself from all mankind. He was one class, all other people another, and he was better than all others, whom he proceeds to classify as extortioners, unjust, and unclean. And then as his eye fell upon the tax gatherer, whose business he regarded as the sum of all villainies, he added, are even as this tax gatherer. And having purged himself of all charges that night be brought against his moral character, he proceeds to glorify himself to God in vaunting his discharge of religious duties, and even the performance of works of supererogation. I fast twice in the week, and the best days to fast are Monday and Thursday, by the way. Moses had appointed only an annual fast, the Great Day of Atonement, Leviticus 16:20-31, and Numbers 29:7. Of course, the Bible talks about the 9th month fast too, and some other fasts, but fasting on the 10th of the first month is an important thing. In this age, it's not required, but it's good to fast that, and it's also good to fast a day next to that, right? And nowadays, it's the most important non-required fast of the year is, a 9th of the 12th month, which is a day before the 4 days of the only obliged, for those who can afford it, sacrifice of the year. But this man superadded 2 private weekly fasts. I give tithes of my whole income. The law tithed only the products of the earth and the offspring of the cattle. Numbers 18:21 and Deuteronomy 14:22 and Leviticus 27:30. Well, you find other aspects of tithing as well, but the law. But he was determined to exceed even the requirements of the law, so he tithed all that came to him in his business. He dwells fondly on these things, showing that he was doing them not for the glory of God, but for his own pleasure. He had no sins to confess. He had no worship to offer God. He had contempt for his fellow men, even for his fellow worshippers. But rather than perhaps exaggerate what was going on here, think of some of the ancient Egyptian rituals, and text of the dead. It's like you're renouncing these sins. So like in the, you go over those passages of Isaiah when you're in a Day of Atonement festival and stuff like this. And, and so you're listing sins and you're dissociating yourself with those sins. At the Great Heat Festival, I would read off one of those things, the Rekunwer. But the tax gatherer stood afar off. He had as much right to the temple as the Pharisees, for he was neither heathen nor proselyte. His reverence for God's holiness and holy places was such that it was enough for him to stand even in the precincts of the holy temple. Perhaps he saw the Pharisee standing in a reserved but conspicuous place and almost envied his fellow worshipper the holiness which made him worthy of such a position, and felt that he himself was not fit to breathe the same air with that man of God. All sights about him and all thoughts of himself conspired to humiliate him. Well, if you're capable of doing the ritual and attending, particularly modestly and all that stuff, know it. Don't say, I'm unworthy because of this other stuff I do. No, you're never going to correct that if you don't. If you say, I'm going to give up on everything until, and that's the whole thing, which the problem of people calling themselves sinners is they give up on trying to be good or act like everything's the same or whatever. But he would not so much as lift up his eyes to heaven. He called himself the sinner by a word which means hardened in sin. Jesus did not depreciate the Pharisee. He gave him his full dues, but God is represented to have sent such a comfort into the breast of the publican, that being forgiven, he left the temple a happier man than the Pharisee, whose only comfort was in his self-complacency. It is supposed that now Jesus left Galilee, crossing the Jordan into Perea. His plan seems to have been to join himself to the great caravans of the pilgrims thronging the Jordan Valley in their progress to the holy city from all the towns about the Sea of Galilee. Now, Matthew 19 and Mark 10 are being referred to here. If we may rely upon Josephus, the multitudes that attended this feast were enormous. He tells us that at one Passover, by actual count, 256,500 paschal lambs were slain. The smallest number of worshippers which the law allowed to eat each lamb was 10, which would make the number of participants in this feast to have been at least 2,565,000. It seems incredible, but if allowance be made for exaggeration, still the number must have been immense, and the roads that led to Jerusalem must have been thronged for several days before the feast and after. Nowadays, we find even bigger stuff. Asherah Arba'in, and more important than that is the Hajj wal Umrah, relative deserts supporting all those people. And honestly, when it was given utmost importance, you could have half a country's population go to the other side of the country and, spend the month's travel or something like that doing that stuff. There were incidences of such things actually being recorded. It was on this tour that the subject of divorce was brought to the attention of Jesus. He found the Pharisees everywhere his enemies and everywhere ready to entrap him. This makes this interview deeply interesting, since the case of Herod Antipas, who had put away his wife and taken a married woman to his bed during the life of her husband, made it politically dangerous for any teacher to discuss the law of marriage in the days and under the government of Herod. If Jesus should utter stringent sentiments and lay down strict rules of morality on the subject of marriage and divorce, he should probably meet a fate similar to that of John the Baptist. But if his utterances should indicate laxity of sentiment, he should lose the confidence of the more moral and pious class of the community. In the reply of Jesus, the attention of the reader is called to the fact that he does not answer as a judge or legislator. He will not take up personal cases for decision. He will not lay down a canon for ecclesiastical discipline. He speaks as a moral teacher, and only as such. The importance of the utterances on this occasion and the moral power of Jesus over mankind is seen in the fact that we have a bare statement of his views spoken authoritatively and as a moral teacher to speak, who has the right to speak, and yet those few words have exerted a greater power over the whole course of human history and destiny, over literature, over political and social and domestic progress, than all the words of any other one man since the world began. And we can't say that even before Jesus. Definitely, objectively, we have to admit that Muhammad had a much greater influence. And even in the time of Muhammad, it took a bit after Muhammad died for Muhammad to have more of an influence than Zarathustra. And, it's hard to determine Gautama in with the other Buddha yoga figures, but certainly he had some would argue that he had a greater influence than Jesus did. Now, Paul, again, Paul's comparable. If you combine Jesus and Paul and the whole movement, it would rest a little, it honestly would rest in terms of its general teaching a bit less than Buddhism might actually be more influential. And then you get Zoroastrianism, then you get Islam. But if you ignore these, if you could look at the single religion theory that's behind the other religions and say maybe that, but then the Yazidi thing, maybe Moloch, Malik Tauz, Gnog Manog, Shaitan is more influential than Jesus. But is that a sober historical statement? Is not that a sober historical statement? Well, again, as I'm saying, it's not. Let any man reflect upon monogamy, the sacredness of marriage. Well, the Bible says a guy can marry up to 700 women and 300 concubines. So concubine is another term for wife, really, if it's allowed. And the Bible doesn't require consent. But monogamy is definitely not the position of the Bible, except for a bishop. The purity of the domestic circle and this lifting of the family to a position which it never held in Greek or Latin or Hebrew civilization. Yeah. No, it actually held a higher position in that than Christians, because you look at the Pauline writings about avoiding marriage and all that, and certain things of the conservative paths, but from which it has had such power over the destinies of the state and the progress of religion. And then let there be allowed to Jesus only such influence as he is plainly entitled to have acknowledged, and who has, by so few words, sent his influence so widely and so deeply down into the heart of man and down into the centuries. Certain Pharisees of the school of Hillel came to Jesus with the question, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Well, it's best that not for every cause. Let us look what the Mosaic law of divorce really was. It is recorded in Deuteronomy 24, 1-4. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her. Well, okay, it depends on what that uncleanness is, right? Then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. Well, depending on the uncleanness, no one may want that. But and honestly, if the husband and wife share that uncleanness, it's like what difference? Would it be best for them to stay together? And if the latter husband hate her and write her a bill of divorcement, may hate some of the deeds or beliefs, but don't hate the person, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house, or with the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife. And if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled. It is to be noticed that provision is made for the husband to put away the wife, but not for the wife to put away the husband. She had no relief, unless her husband committed adultery with another married woman, and then elsewhere the law of Moses provided that he should be put to death. Again, there is no great uncertainty as to the meaning of the phrase, some uncleanness. So when it came to criminal penalties, almost completely devoid of bigotry. This was a notorious subject of controversy between the schools of Shammai and Hillel in the days of Jesus. The former, it is generally taught that it meant an act of lewdness on the part of the wife, but this could hardly be, as that was punishable with death. Wiener, however, asserts that the Gemara represents the view of Shammai as less strict. Even public violations of decorum might furnish ground for divorcing according to his doctrine. Quoted in President Wolsey's very valuable essay on divorce. Josephus represents the views of Hillel. He says in Antiquities 4:8-23, he who wishes to be separated from his wife for any reason whatever, and many such are occurring among men, must affirm it in writing his intention of no longer cohabitating with her. Nobel, in his commentary on Deuteronomy, says, Irvath Debar, in the common version translated as some uncleanness, is used of human excrement in Deuteronomy 23:13, and is probably a shame our disgrace, as Isaiah 24, from anything. So not disease, but some physical condition. That is, anything which awakens the feeling of shame and repulsion, inspires aversion and disgust, and nauseates in contact. For instance, a bad breath, a running sore, etc. Oh, wait till the injury heals. Come on, don't divorce over some injury that's taking weeks to heal or whatever. He adds, in the name of Christ Jesus, the expression was in controversy. The school of Shammai took it as being the same with Debar, Dervoth. Well, there's no V, so is it Arbath, or what is it? A thing of uncleanness or disgust, and understood it of unchaste demeanor and shameless lewd behavior. So if it's a venereal disease and both of them got it, you know. But if she has sinned, you don't, if she has sinned against her husband, then one doesn't stay. Same thing with the husband. And it can't always be proven which one. And so they're given some leeway to leave each other if they've. But the school of Hillel, which the rabbins follow, explained it as something disgusting or any other cause. This was, of course, giving the largest license. In the tractate Gittin, folio 90, it is expressly said, even if she had only oversalted his soup, nay, with shameless license, even if he should find a fairer one, in whom he has more pleasure. The repeated rule in the Talmud runs, Hillel loosens what Shammai binds. Josephus shows the laxity of the times by coolly telling us that his first wife left him, and that he put away the second, although the mother of 3 children by him, that he might take the third. Now see, monogamy wasn't required, and it shouldn't be a system of divorcing your way to having another wife. To the question from the Pharisees whether a man might put away his wife for any cause whatever that seemed to him sufficient, Jesus makes the following reply. Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, on this account shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Get married, have sex, have children, the first 3 commandments you find in the Bible, so that they are no more 2 but one flesh. What, therefore, God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. The Pharisees retorted with this question, why therefore did Moses command to give a bill of divorcement and to put her away? Jesus replied, Moses, because of your hard-heartedness, afforded you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. But I say to you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for fornication, shall marry another, committeth adultery. It is noticed that frequently after a public discourse, Jesus was questioned by his disciples as to his meaning. For obvious prudential reasons, they refrained from asking, in the presence of the captious enemies of their master, questions and answers to which would relieve their perplexities. On this occasion, when they were in private, the disciples, reviewing his reply to the Pharisees, said to him, if thus it is the defect of the man with the wife, it does not profit to marry. He said, all receive not this saying, but those to whom it has been given. There are eunuchs that are born so from the womb of their mother. And there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men. And there are eunuchs who made themselves for the sake of the kingdom of heavens. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it. Now, if we recall what Jesus said on this subject in his Sermon on the Mount, we shall have before us all his teaching on this important subject. I say to you that whosoever shall put away his wife, except for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry the divorced committeth adultery. The first thing to notice is that Jesus criticizes the Mosaic law as not being perfect and not absolute and not perpetual. It was an expedient. It was the strictest schoolmaster the people could endure. There are certain fixed principles, certain high ideals in monotheism to which Moses did not reach. Well, not the record that we have, but maybe. But he did the best that could be done for them with that people. Jesus ascends above Moses. Well, he does the mission of his time. He goes up to the origin of the race. He announces what God did and what God intended.